Most people think deep thinkers are simply people who spend a lot of time in their own heads. They're often labeled as quiet, overly serious, or even socially awkward. But psychology suggests something very different. The habits that make someone seem distant on the outside often reflect a mind that's constantly analyzing, connecting ideas, and searching for meaning beneath the surface. Researchers have long found that people who naturally engage in deeper reflection tend to process information differently. They don't just react to the world, they try to understand it. And because of that, they're often misunderstood by people who mistake silence for indifference or caution for insecurity. What's fascinating is that many deep thinkers don't even realize they're different. They assume everyone notices the same patterns, asks the same questions, or feels the same mental intensity. But they don't. So if you've ever wondered why your mind seems to work differently from the people around you, this video might explain more than you expect. Here are 8 things most people don't realize about deep thinkers. And by the end, you may discover that some of the traits you've been trying to hide are actually your greatest strengths. The first thing most people don't realize is that deep thinkers rarely accept the obvious answer. When they're told something, their mind immediately begins asking questions. Why is this true? What evidence supports it? Is there another explanation? Instead of accepting information at face value, they naturally examine it from multiple angles. Psychologists often associate this habit with analytical thinking and a high need for cognitive complexity. Rather than seeking quick certainty, deep thinkers are comfortable living with uncertainty while they search for better answers. To other people, this can look like overcomplicating simple situations. But in reality, it's often a sign of intellectual curiosity rather than indecision. And that curiosity doesn't stop with ideas. It also changes the way they understand people. Before we continue, I'm curious. Have you ever found yourself questioning things that everyone else simply accepts? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience. Another thing people misunderstand is that deep thinkers notice emotional details most people completely miss. A slight change in someone's tone, a forced smile, an unusually long pause before an answer. These tiny signals often stand out immediately. This doesn't necessarily mean they're psychic or unusually intuitive. Instead, their brains tend to pay closer attention to subtle patterns that others unconsciously ignore. Research on emotional intelligence suggests that people who carefully observe social cues are often better at understanding complex emotional situations. But there's a downside. Because they notice so much, they often carry emotional burdens that don't even belong to them. And this heightened awareness leads directly to another misunderstood habit. Deep thinkers often spend more time alone, not because they dislike people, but because solitude helps them process everything they've absorbed. Their minds are constantly connecting conversations, memories, emotions, and possibilities. Without quiet moments, that mental activity becomes overwhelming. Studies on reflective thinking have shown that periods of solitude can improve creativity, problem-solving, and self-awareness. Yet society frequently mistakes this preference for loneliness or social anxiety. In reality, many deep thinkers enjoy meaningful relationships. They simply value quality over quantity. But spending so much time reflecting creates another challenge that few people ever see. Deep thinkers often replay conversations long after they've ended. They'll wonder whether they misunderstood someone's intentions, whether they could have expressed themselves better, or whether a single sentence revealed something deeper. From the outside, this looks like overthinking. But psychology suggests that reflective rumination isn't always negative. When balanced, it helps people learn from experiences and develop greater self-awareness. The challenge is knowing when reflection becomes endless analysis. If this is resonating with you so far, take a moment to subscribe. Psychology Unlocked is all about uncovering the hidden patterns that shape who we are. Another surprising trait is that deep thinkers are usually less interested in being right than in discovering what's true. Changing their opinion doesn't necessarily threaten their identity. If convincing evidence appears, they're often willing to adjust their beliefs. This flexibility is connected to intellectual humility, a psychological characteristic linked to better decision-making and lifelong learning. Ironically, people sometimes mistake this openness for uncertainty. But being willing to question your own beliefs often requires far more confidence than blindly defending them. And this mindset changes the way deep thinkers experience success itself. Many deep thinkers struggle with feeling misunderstood. They may explain an idea enthusiastically only to realize no one else sees what they see. Sometimes they avoid sharing their thoughts altogether because previous experiences taught them that people would dismiss them as too complicated or thinking too much. Over time, this creates an invisible loneliness. Not because they're physically alone, but because they rarely feel fully understood. Psychologists have found that feeling psychologically understood is one of the strongest predictors of emotional well-being. When that understanding is missing, even crowded rooms can feel isolating. Yet this struggle often develops into one of their greatest strengths. Deep thinkers usually possess remarkable self-awareness. They regularly examine their own motivations, fears, mistakes, and beliefs. Instead of blaming every problem on the outside world, they ask difficult questions about themselves. What could I have done differently? Why did I react that way? What am I avoiding? This level of introspection isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it means confronting uncomfortable truths that others never stop long enough to notice. But over time, this habit often leads to significant personal growth because genuine change begins with honest self-observation. And perhaps the most surprising realization comes from this final trait. Deep thinkers rarely seek attention, but they deeply seek meaning. Status, popularity, and external validation often matter less than purpose, authenticity, and genuine understanding. They'd rather have one profound conversation than 10 hours of meaningless small talk. They'd rather solve one difficult question than receive praise for easy answers. Psychologists studying intrinsic motivation consistently find that people driven by internal meaning often experience greater long-term satisfaction than those driven only by external rewards. The world may not always recognize this immediately. But meaning has a way of creating a deeper kind of success. When you step back, a different picture begins to emerge. What looks like overthinking is often careful analysis. What looks like sensitivity is often heightened awareness. What looks like silence is often intense mental activity. What looks like questioning everything is often intellectual curiosity. And what looks like being different is often simply seeing the world through a deeper psychological lens. Deep thinkers aren't perfect. They can become trapped in analysis, carry emotional weight that isn't theirs, and struggle to feel understood. But the very qualities that make life more mentally demanding also allow them to notice connections, understand people, and grow in ways that many never experience. Perhaps the goal isn't to think less. Perhaps it's to recognize that your mind isn't working against you. It may simply be working differently. Which of these traits felt the most accurate for you? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video helped put words to something you've been experiencing for years, share it with someone who needs to hear it. They may finally understand something about themselves they've never been able to explain. If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Being a deep thinker isn't about appearing intelligent. It's about having a mind that naturally searches beneath the surface. While others may focus on what's obvious, you may find yourself asking questions that reveal hidden patterns, deeper meanings, and new perspectives. That difference can sometimes feel isolating, but it can also become one of your greatest strengths when you learn to embrace it. Subscribe to Psychology Unlocked for more psychology insights, hidden intelligence traits, personality discoveries, and fascinating human behavior explained.